This is a recording to look at some tools that will provide insight into application craft performance. To do this, I have a simple application that I'm going to test. This is it. Here I will edit it, and there is only one page. There is no code, and there are no events. No event handlers, and there's just one component. It's a text label, and that's all there is to this application that I'm going to test for performance. The tool that I'm going to use is called WebPageTest. What I first want to do is copy the link address and go to WebPageTest.org. It's very simple to fill out. In the URL, just paste your URL, do a test location. What I want to do is just test Chicago, and it gives you multiple browsers you can work with. I'm going to use Firefox, and there's numerous advanced settings to use. The advanced setting that I'm going to use is, right now at least, is a label so I can identify it. So I'll do Firefox, Chicago, DSL, and no blocking, so this will identify out of my test results which test result that I've done. There's other things that you can set that are more advanced than I want to go to at this time, but you can go in and ignore SSL certificate errors. You can capture packet trace, whatnot. Under authorization, if you have a login, you can provide the user ID and password. You can enter some simple scripts, and you could look at the help to see what those scripts are, but you can put data into your widgets and hit buttons and actually navigate your website and capture the performance. You can also block the loading of different widgets or different JavaScript files. You can read the documentation on that. And there's also, you can capture video, and you can measure the above fold rendering time, but as the notes say here, it takes about 4 minutes to do that, so I'm not going to do that for now. We're just going to use a label, and we're going to start the test. It comes up first, and it sits in the queue and it's waiting. You can see a summary up in the top left corner, the URL that is being tested, where it's being tested from, Chicago. It's using Firefox, and it's going to be going over a DSL. So now it's testing. At this point in time, it'll take about 30 seconds or so to get the first statistics of the test, and then after it has the page fully loaded and has all the data, as you see here, it will then run another test so that the browser can make use of some different caching and performance enhancements, so you can see the difference of an initial load versus a subsequent page load. So it'll take about 30 seconds for this portion to finish too. So we'll wait for that to finish. What we'll have is we'll have a waterfall display. We'll be able to click into this and get a summary view, but we'll have a display that shows us the performance of all the artifacts that we're loading into the page. So here's a summary. The load time for the first view was 3.5 seconds. The first byte took about 0.7 seconds, and starting to render the page took almost 3 seconds. Now remember, this is nothing but a label on a page, so that took quite a while. For the document to complete was 3.5 seconds, and it took 25 requests. To be fully loaded, 4.5 seconds. So let's look a little bit more at the details down at the bottom here. You can see the content. Most of the content being loaded is the JavaScript, which is probably no surprise to most of us. And you can see it's also the largest amount in bytes. So let's drill down into the waterfall picture. Now first off, what you get is you get a nice little summary here of the different areas, and you get a grade, and it looks like we have 2 F's and 3 A's. So our first F is because of the first byte load time, and our second F is because of caching static content. We're not caching it, and then we're not even getting a grade because we're not using CDN. I think if we go back to the summary view here, nope, let's go back to the details. So we're on the waterfall, so you can see how long it takes to load these files that we're bringing down. So 1.5 seconds, almost 2 seconds there, and you can move your mouse over and see what file is being downloaded. What was interesting to me is that we're loading Google Maps Advanced, and the weather component, and these aren't even being accessed by the application. So it does take some bandwidth, it does take some time, maybe not enough to worry about it compared relative to these. But you get an idea again of the time it takes to download and the artifacts that are being downloaded. Down at the bottom you can see CPU utilization. You can see there's a little bump here in the CPU as it gets ready to render the page. This green line is the time to the first byte, and this document ready, the blue line, or excuse me, start to render is the green line. The purple and blue line is the document complete. So we started to render it at 2.8, took another almost full second to actually have the document complete, and then we were able to display the page. Down in this connection view you can see the DNS lookup with the blue here. You can look at some initial connection, and then starting to render again at 2.8 and document complete again at about 3.5 seconds. So let's go to the performance review. Now here, what's interesting is we're failing. This is where we're getting our F. We're failing in not statically caching, or caching the static resources. None of these are cached, and I don't know which ones of these are the code pages that would be changing, but most of these are not going to be changing. They should probably be cached. We're also not looking at any CSS and JavaScript being combined, and because we're not using CDN, we fail on that too. It doesn't give us a grade, but it shows you here that we could have put a lot of these JavaScripts and CSSs on the CDN and increased performance quite a bit. We can look at the content breakdown. This kind of goes into more detail of what you have in your content, how many requests for the different types of MIME types, and how many bytes there are. And we can see there's 361,000 bytes for the JavaScript. Different breaks down here as you can look through. And so if we look at this summary down here, this is very interesting. If you go down, you can see that the browser could have cached the assets, but we did zero caching. So all of these pages here have no max age or expires time on them. And same way with we failed with the static CSS and JavaScript files, that we're not combining them, and then we're not using the CDN. So again, it shows all of the files that could have been on the CDN that it thinks are static. So I think that there's some issues here that application craft folks could look at and maybe improve the performance. But the next part of this video is to look at another tool, and it's called DynaTrace. And DynaTrace, you need to install it. You can download it, and I'll have that on my blog. You can download it and install it, and it works with IE and Firefox. And that's one reason that I did the web page test with Firefox, because I'm going to use Firefox here too. What you have to be careful of is when you install it in Firefox, it enables it puts a plugin or an add-on, and you need to make sure that it's enabled. If you come in and you try to use DynaTrace and you find that it's not capturing any of the data, be sure to go in and look at your add-ons, extensions, and make sure that DynaTrace is enabled. So all you have to do is go into DynaTrace and look at your managed configurations. I've already put in the URL to the page that we're looking at, and I put in what the name of it is, and I make sure that I clear the browser cache. So let's just go ahead and run it and let it gather the statistics. So it brings up the page. It's loading the data now, loading all the content, and then we have our hello. So I kill the browser, and now we have our statistics. So let's look at the performance report. This gives us a good indication, kind of like the web page test, gives us an indication of how we are performing, and it gives us a nice grade. So overall rank, we're getting a D. Caching, we're not doing very well at caching, we're getting a D here. Network, we're doing better over the network. Server, a C. But look at the JavaScript rank. We're way down here as an F. And if you look at Further down, you can see how we compare against the general best practices. We're way down at the bottom for load time, real bad, and we're only putting one little element up. Again, how do we compare our time for server and client? Again, we're way down here at failing compared to the 50th and 90th percentile for time spent. And our network round trips, we're looking pretty good. We're up here at the top. We only had 23 round trips. Now, what you can do is you can click into these reports and see what each of these do. But let's just go through the tabs here. For caching, we're getting a D, and you can look at all the elements that are being cached, and you can read, you can click on the best practices and read what do they consider best practices for caching. And so this explains about headers and cache control and everything. You can read through that, but this is going to be something that Application Craft needs to address because we don't have access to that. Oops, I killed my, there we go. So you can look at the network. We're getting a B here. You can look at the files that are coming over the network, and it has, again, some best practices of network performance. Server side, we're getting a C. JavaScript, here's where we're getting our F. There's 8 JavaScript handlers and jQuery-like calls taking longer than 20 milliseconds coming from 14 files. And 8 script blocks impact the rank. So you can look at all the scripts that are being brought over and how long they're taking to load. You can look at what calls are being done, the forward traces, the back traces. Again, Application Craft would have to look at this and try to figure out how they can improve performance. Again, here's the best practices. So overall, you can look at the summary and see how we're performing. You can drill down and find out how your JavaScript code is performing, how it's being loaded, and I hope that soon we'll be able to see this and see that everything's ranking as an A as we use CDN and caching the JavaScript. Hope this helps. Please look at the links on the blog, and let's see how this improves over time.